You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. My name is Chris. I am here with Chris, and yeah, my microphone has gone off. No, camera off again. Thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be another fabulous show, and it's been we are flying through these shows this season, Chris. Already, we're in like episode 5 of season 11, coming thick and fast. How are you doing? How's your week been?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm really looking forward to tonight's guest. Obviously, looking to learn loads of inside knowledge about how things work in the world of crime. Obviously, you know, that's something that I'm a bit passionate about as well, and I'd like to get a bit of advice because my writing's a bit lackluster at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there's going to be a lot of experience that we can take from this show tonight and our guest, because that person has written in the military and police procedurals and the crime genre in depth, and has got a lot of praise for that indeed. So there's going to be a lot of questions coming tonight around that. So yeah, get excited. I put a tweet out on Twitter this week, Chris, about what people's favorite book to screen adaptations were. You had your classics in there, like Shutter Island and Fight Club, of course. I bet you vouch for that one. But also, there was an overwhelming response for Lockwood & Co. Right. This is something I've not read or seen before. It is now a series on Netflix, and I started watching that as a result. And I've never seen a reaction like that. There was an army of fans protesting that Lockwood & Co. is the ultimate adaptation and book series as well. So we might have got some good news with that author coming on the show. Nice. Have you ever seen that, Chris?
No, I mean, when you mentioned it, I was like, what? So obviously I looked into it myself, and yeah, like the first thing I was like, I'm going to read this. So I went to Amazon, went to download it, and it was like aimed at 10 plus. I was like, hang on a minute.
It's
I'm significantly older than 10. So why am I trying to read this book?
It says aimed at 10 plus, but then it's like about ghosts and scary, and so and there's swear words in it. So it's really kind of borderline between a young adult and potentially it could be a lot more adult directed. So it's a real kind of interesting in between.
Nice as a children's book. I like it.
Definitely. But certainly worth checking out. So there's good news on that front. And yeah, like I said, 5 episodes into season 11 now, and we got some good guests lined up. Yeah, looking forward to some, Chris, indeed. So should we get tonight's guest on?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep, rambling on here. So tonight's guest is a crime author, as we mentioned, and we'll be discussing his career and his works. If you're a fan of police procedures and military thrillers, you're in the right place. But of course, even if you're not into those kind of things, we always take some great advice, some stories from our interviews, and that will be no different tonight. His debut, Wicked Game, made the list for the John Creasy Dagger Award, and it made the top categories in the Amazon and W.H. Smith and Kobo charts. By the end of 2016, Amazon UK had listed it in the highest rated of the Rising Star novels for 2016, and his stories have been praised for the gripping plot, well-drawn characters, and emotional depth. And thanks to his own personal experiences in the military and in the police, they have been called exciting, fast-paced, and authentic. He was listed as number 2022 in the W.H. Smith's all-time of best crime writers. And he is now here promoting his latest novel, No Ordinary Day, which is a story of espionage, betrayal, terrorism, and corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matt Johnson. Hello, Matt.
Hello, good evening, Chris and Chris. Nice to be here. I just had to correct you slightly there, Chris. No Ordinary Day is actually my first attempt at non-fiction.
Oh, I apologise. But yes, it's there in the top corner and you can see it. yeah, of course. And then we'll go into depth in that a bit later on in the show. But thank you so much for joining us from your wonderful beach.
Yeah. Welcome to Cornwall.
How are you doing, Matt?
Pardon me?
How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. It's frustrated by the weather. It's a time that I'd like to get out because we've just acquired a new puppy.
Wow.
A young fox red cocker spaniel who is who we've called Bandit.
Nice.
And it's a very appropriate name for him because he is a little mischief. We've just spent 5 minutes chasing him around the garden, trying to get my wife's gardening gloves back from him.
Yeah.
But he's a real character. And of course, I would like to be able to get him out and take him out for a walk. But this afternoon, the weather has been absolutely grim. So
it really has been. And of course, Cocker Spaniels, notoriously energetic dogs as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm probably a bit too old to be starting with young Cocker Spaniel puppies because I don't bend down quite as easy as I used to when I was young. But he doesn't care. So he just goes and he's like a little pocket rocket. It's great fun, great fun.
No,
and it's nice. It's nice. You know, it takes a pet, particularly a dog, to get you out.
Yeah.
To be out in the countryside and enjoying the fresh air. I mean, if I'm honest, I'm quite sure if I didn't have the dogs, I wouldn't go out. You know, any excuse, you'd look at the weather and think, "Oh, I'm not going out in that. That's too grim," you know. But when they got the dogs, they look at you and you're saying, "Come on, Dad, we want to go out. We want to go out," and I wouldn't be without them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things. As a writer, we like to sit by the desk, and we openly talked about this recently on the show. How getting out for a walk can be really helpful for the creative process, especially if you're getting in a bit of a slump. So that's a really good thing to do that on sort of demand rather than just when you feel like it. So that's
something I absolutely would. Some people talk to you about what they call it writer's block and things like that. But when you sort of stump for an idea, but the thing is that the creativity isn't flowing. Really, I think that's probably a better way of describing what people euphemistically call writer's block.
Yeah,
and I almost exclusively I go out for a walk. What I have learned is to take a digital recorder with me.
Nice.
Because I would find that I would go out for these walks and you'd have this great idea. And by the time you got home, put the dogs away, toweled them down, sat yourself down in front of the computer, it's gone. You know, what was that idea? God, it was so brilliant while you're out, but of course it's not real. So your brain hasn't really sort of logged it. So now, as the idea comes to me, I record it onto the digital recorder. Marvelous. So as you sit there, just press play again and hear your own voice giving you a nice aid memoir as to what it was, what you were thinking about it. Very
I mean, when you're writing crime and you're recording some of your notes whilst walking behind someone, that can be a bit unsettling for them. But yeah, it's definitely worth recording. Yeah.
I hope nobody from the security services ever looks at my computer usage references and things like that.
I think, if you're writing crime, it's probably one of the most daunting things to put in your search history, isn't it? But that's a great image, Chris, that someone's walking down the street and just behind them you can hear, stuff him in a bag. Anyway, so thank you, Matt, again for joining us. And what we're going to do first, as we do in every show, is play a little video, which is a part one of the show called The Road to Writing. And we're going to try and delve into the history behind your journey of writing. So I'll play the video and we'll get into it. Matt,
that is really cool. It's really cool.
Well, it's the little noise in that little soundtrack is one of the old, when we were audio-based podcasts only when we first started. That was one of the segment audio clips which I put on the video. So it's kind of a bit of a nostalgic video for us. Matt, if you could please let everybody know where your writing journey started out, and do you remember growing up when that kind of clicked in your mind that you wanted to be a writer, and how did that process kind of take place?
Well, I've got to go back a long way to start with. When I was a teenager, living in Harrow in North London, I used to go to a local library, a place called Rayners Lane. They had a really big library, like many of these facilities. Sadly, it's gone now. But I can remember being. I'm jumping about all over the place.
That's my fault.
I can remember going in there and grabbing the latest science fiction. I was really into science fiction at the time. I used to read things like Isaac Asimov and things like that. And I remember reading Dune, Frank Herbert. Absolutely loved that book. So I had a passion for reading as a teenager. But like many of us, as you grow older and you go into the world of work, the opportunity and the time and the energy even to read just dissipates. I mean, I would be a once a year on holiday, probably at the airport, buy the latest Reacher novel and enjoy reading it while I was on holiday. But when I was at home, I didn't find the time to read. And so I think realistic, it would be factual to say that I had no aspirations of writing, none at all. Professionally, I did a lot of writing. That was the nature of the work I did as a policeman. You write reports, you write evidence, you write, investigations and things like that. You're always forever writing. And in those days, of course, a lot was done freehand. But no real aspirations. And then in the late 1990s, I experienced, to cut a very long story short, symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, linked back to some incidents that I've been involved with as a policeman. And I was debilitated by illness. I was unable to work. I had counselling, antidepressants. Eventually, I started to recover. And as part of the recovery process, the counsellor I was seeing asked me to take part in a creative writing therapy. I would sit down with her. She would give me homework each week, and I would go home and I would write about my symptoms, about my experiences. First of all, I found it very hard. I found it quite disturbing to think about things in depth and write about them. I found it very uncomfortable. But as the weeks rolled by, I got better at it. And one day she said to me, had I ever considered writing a book? And I laughed. I said, no, absolutely not. No thoughts whatsoever. And there I sort of parked the idea, really. That was a sort of about 2000, 2001. I left the police. I was medically retired, and I moved down to South Wales. And I was living in South Wales when, in 2012, a chap called Michael Pemberton committed suicide. Now, I knew Michael Pemberton. Michael Pemberton was a corporal of horse in the Royal in the Lifeguards, and he'd been one of the guys who was present when the Hyde Park bombing went off. He was riding Sefton, the horse that was so badly injured, and which many people remember made that incredible recovery. Michael, when he left the army, he suffered with very bad post-traumatic stress, and he never recovered. And in 2012, he committed suicide. And it was, to me, it was such a waste. I was so cross that nobody had been able to get to him and say, there are alternatives to ending your own life. And the reason the counsellor had said to me that I should write, and the reason I'd laughed, was because she wanted me to write some kind of autobiographical account of my personal experiences and how I'd experienced PTSD and how I'd got through it. And I wasn't really minded to do so because I thought nobody would read it. But then when Michael killed himself, I looked back on what this counsellor said, and I thought, I could have a go, but I was still very much of a mind that who would read it. And then I had this idea that, well, perhaps rather than writing things in a factual autobiographical form, if I wrote fiction, so I committed my experiences and knowledge to a story, which during the process of entertaining informed at the same time, I could reach a wider audience. And that's how Wicked Game was born.
Wow.
Incredible. Yeah. It's amazing to see that journey of not really being directed towards writing in your life. And obviously I completely understand, as someone who's worked in sort of professional services, how writing is part of your routine, and especially in the era that you're obviously working in the police, where probably not well before, but before computer sort of took over all of the reports, that how much you would have been doing in that sense, to then find it through that kind of means. And someone who's kind of alien to writing in the world of fiction as well. So I'm really kind of interested how you obviously got the life experience there. And I mentioned at the start of the show how your experiences with the police and everything like that can easily lead through your life experience into that to make it authentic. But how did you approach the fiction side of life? Did you find that an easy transition, or was it something you had to then learn on the job?
I really was very naive, I think, when I started. As I mentioned a moment ago, I wasn't a great fan of reading fiction. I liked mostly non-fiction books, and as a teenager, I read science fiction. And I really thought to myself, well, how hard can it be, to write a story? So I literally sat at the computer one evening and just started. I had no real plan. I had no training as to how to write it. So I came at it completely raw, and I just wrote the kind of story that I thought I would like to read. I remembered from my youth reading stories by people like James Herbert, The Rats, The Fog, that kind of thing. And I remember being impressed by the way that these guys wrote short chapters. And I liked the short chapter technique, because for me as a reader, if I'm reading a book and I get to the end of a chapter, particularly if I'm reading in bed prior to going to sleep, I'll look at the next chapter and see how long it is. And if it's 5 or 6 pages, I'll think, I'll read another chapter. If it's 25, 26 pages, I might say, I'll read that tomorrow. And then what happens is you read the 5 or 6 pages and you reach another cliffhanger point, and you think to yourself, I wonder how long the next chapter is. And you read, and it's another 5 or 6 pages. So you read again. Before you know it, you've read those 25, 26 pages that you wouldn't have read if it'd been a long chapter. And people like Joseph Wambaugh, who I loved, and Frank Herbert, that was the style they used. And I thought, well, I'm going to use that style. I'm going to use that short chapter style. I'm going to try and build in cliffhanger moments like they did, and then just see how that goes. So that's what I did. And then, of course, I showed it to friends and family, as you do. And of course, friends and family say, wow, it's super. Because friends and family, of course, aren't experts, and they're not that knowledgeable. They think it works great, and you can't fail. So I sent it off to agents and to a few publishers, and I got the standard responses. Those that bothered to respond, and I must say the vast majority didn't. But those that were polite enough just said things like, thanks, but no thanks. It's not the kind of thing we're looking for. And so I self-published. My brother told me about the KDP, Kindle Direct program, and I published it through the KDP. And it went up onto KDP in about 2015. And it was doing quite nicely. It was getting downloaded by a few people, and it was starting to get some feedback. And the kind of feedback I was getting was encouraging, because it seemed that people were getting the message that I was trying to interject into the book. So I was quite pleased. And then I had the most incredible piece of luck. Because it was a military policing type overlap topic, the book had become quite popular with soldiers who were going off to theatre. And whilst they were in a theatre of war, Afghanistan or Iraq, as you guys probably know, they can't take many books with them because they're very limited in the amount of kit that they can carry. So e-readers had become very popular, Kindle specifically. This particular RAF guy was working on a Chinook in Afghanistan, and he was reading my book in the shade beneath a Chinook aircraft. When a journalist walked past, he was writing a autobiographical account of a pilot called Frenchy Duncan, who'd won the Distinguished Flying Cross for his bravery while he was actually flying the Chinook. The book was called Sweating the Metal, and the journalist was a chap called Anthony Douglas. And Anthony asked this loadmaster from the aircraft what he was reading. He told him about my book. And Anthony, bless him, was sufficiently curious to want to download my book when he got back to the UK. And he downloaded it, liked it, and got in touch with me and said that he'd recommended me to his agent. Next thing I know, his agent was in touch, invited me up to London, where I did a 4-hour interview with him.
Wow.
which was quite amazing. So essentially, they want to know if you can talk the talk as well as write the words. If you can talk the talk, walk the walk as well as write the words. Can they put you in front of a camera? Can they do this, that with you? What can they do with you? Are you a bit of a boffin who just sits there and sits behind a keyboard, but actually would be useless in front of people? Or are you actually a sellable product? So I ended up signing with him. He found me 4 publishers who wanted to take the book on. And eventually I met Karen Sullivan from Arenda Books, who was, a bit of a human dynamo. Incredible energy she's got. And she put me in touch with her editor, Wes Camel. And I would credit Wes Camel with turning me from a bloke who could write a few words into somebody who was actually capable of calling himself an author and writing a book that was good enough for the commercial market.
Wow.
Because he was very honest with me. He wrote a very, very lengthy analysis of my my first book that I'd self-published. And I read it and I threw it up in the air. I was horrified. It was 6 A4 pages, basically taking the book apart.
Wow.
And why on earth do they want to publish me if this is what they really think of it, And over the course of the next year, the book came off Amazon. Over the course of the next year, I worked with Wes Camel, and he gave me what I would describe as a fast-track course in creative writing. And he said, you're a great storyteller. He said, you're a great storyteller. He said, but there is more to authoring. There is more to writing a book than telling a story. He said, your story is great. It's very entertaining, he said, but he said, it can be so much better. And I thought, well, how? It's right. These guys are not editors for no reason. They are professionals, and they are, they have a wealth of knowledge. And when he would say to me simple things like, when I was describing a meeting between 3 detectives and they were talking about this very subject, it was a very interesting conversation, what they were doing, and there was a little bit of action in the background. He said, tell me what these guys are thinking while this is going on. Tell me what they're seeing. Build in the atmosphere of the room as well as he said, your dialogue is great. It's authentic. It's exciting. He said, it's 2-dimensional. You've got to make this 3-dimensional for people to enjoy it. And when I started to do and to apply the guidance he was giving me, and of course, I would then look back at my writing and think, oh my God, he's so right. And I'm, Wes, if you're listening, I'm eternally grateful to you.
And of course, that ended up being nominated for the Creasy Dagger Award, which is incredible. And it topped many charts.
Incredible. I was at Crime Fest. I'd never been there before. I'd never been to a literary festival before, ever, guys. Never had. It was my first experience. I'm sitting there. I'm standing there, Robert, in this big hall, and I'm distracted, chatting to this pretty young lady. as you can be. It can happen.
Yeah.
And in the background, I hear the name of my book and my name, as and what's that? It's strange. And I looked round to see this big screen with the cover of my book and my name on it, and I said, "What's that all about then?" She said, "Oh, you've been shortlisted for a Crime Writers Association Dagger Award." And I said, "What's one of those?" No, I'd never heard of the Crime Writers Association. I'd never heard of the daggers.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. What does that mean then? She says, "Well, it means you're going to sell a lot more books than you currently do." Okay, that's really great. Anyway, that was next thing I know, I've got all these people squeezing my palm and shaking my hand and patting me on the back and thinking, "Well, this is weird. What's this all about? I don't know anything about this." But it was all very exciting. And the next thing you know, W.H. Smith are buying loads of copies of the books and putting in the bookshelves and things like that. And and I get a free ticket because I've for the following year's Crime Fest, which was great as well.
So Matt, how do you go from what is essentially writing a first draft that is a very cathartic experience for you to then being thrust into a business that you have just admitted that you don't know an awful lot about in terms of awards and things like that? So how have you managed that transition between writing your first novel to moving on into becoming an author, becoming embedded in this business, and meeting expectations for readers and things like that? How have you managed that transition?
Well, it's a slow process, and it's a very steep learning curve because I come from a very disciplined, a very different kind of world from the creative world that is publishing. The people that work in and occupy the publishing world are very different from the kind of people that I've been used to working with. I won't deny it's had its problems. I've had my way of doing things. Excuse me. They've got their way of doing things. Sometimes the two clash. When my publishers got in touch with me and said, "Oh, we've had an invitation for you to appear at iWrite." My reaction was, "Yeah, okay. What's that then?" Now, I didn't know iWrite is one of the biggest crime fiction festivals in Scotland. And so my reaction, which was rather unenthusiastic and bland, didn't go down terribly well with my publisher.
Yeah.
Understandable from her point of view. Because, my naivety. So I now know sort of if something like that happens now, Google it before you open your mouth, And
they go, "Oh wow, this is amazing."
Exactly. What's incredible about that is it was when you talked about having that 4-hour interview and they're determining whether your author brand is on point as well. And we mentioned this in the show before. We think it's important to have yours as a self-published author, your social brand, social media brand, and you coming across as a person helps you sell books as well. It's incredible to see them go through that process in a publishing house and to vet you in that sense. And that kind of was reflecting what you're talking about there, of knowing the ins and outs of what they're talking to you about to make them happy almost. It's kind of, you really have to up yourself in all kind of areas of the knowledge of the industry rather than just being able to write that book.
No, that's right. Chris Hooley, you'll understand this. Coming from a military background, the more you like a person, the ruder you are to them. If you are good mates, you can be incredibly rude to people, and they take no offence, and it's banter. It's what we call banter. You do that in the publishing world, and they take very offence very quickly. Yeah. And I came unstuck a couple of times when my sense of humour didn't actually quite rub with some of my peers. Yeah. So I learned to moderate my sense of humour. I'd like to think that some of my peers I have actually brought round into art. I had a great event at again, it was at Crime Fest actually, where I was with James Law, who is a very experienced submariner. And James, to my mind, made the mistake of asking how my publisher had got on with a manuscript written in crayon. As we all know, that is a criticism often levelled at squaddies, that they still use crayons to write.
Yeah.
So then we had the debate between the Army versus Navy, the Premier Service versus the Senior Service, how submarine racing was probably one of the most boring sports you could watch. And the jokes just went on. And we had this audience at Crime Fits in stitches because it was like military policing humour. And we realised then that there was a should we say an opportunity there to show an audience that were used to publishing type conversations, that there are actually as a world outside publishing, and that world can be quite funny.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Brilliant.
To get back to your original question, to get back to how I was going to develop, for me, I would say the most important thing was being mentored by somebody in the industry who really knows what they're talking about. Now, I was lucky because I had the guidance that Wes Campbell gave me. But in the very early days, I made friends with Peter James, who, of course, we all know who Peter James is. Now, Peter James, probably one of the world's most successful authors. Absolutely fantastic. His Roy Gray series. And little old me, I thought, what would Peter James want talking to people like me? Now, I first met Peter James, I think it was at Harrogate, and we got talking and we became friends. And I thought, this is a bit weird, this is the Peter James. What's he want talking to me? Now, it actually turns out that Peter James is a warm, generous, nice guy. And if he, I've spoken to him many times, and when I've got a problem, I can go to Peter and say, what do you think I should do? And things like that. And having that kind of guidance of an experienced mentor has been very useful to me. And it's something that I've taken on board too, because now, fast forward a few years, and I'm not doing too badly myself, I now get people coming to me for advice. And I always think to myself, it is difficult because you are always busy and it's difficult to find the time. But I think to myself, Peter Jones found the time for me. I'm going to find the time.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, would Peter look at your work if you said, I'm struggling with this? Like, can you have a little look at it? Because from my own experience, talking about a render as well, I had the honor of sending Will Carver some work, and he sent it back to me whilst I was studying for a master's at university. And the feedback that he gave me in a short email was better than anything that I'd had while studying on the master's course. And I learned so much just in a very short little dialogue between the two of us. So is that sort of the relationship that you got with Peter? Like, are you comfortable enough to send him work and things like that? No,
I've never actually sent him work, but I have talked about practical situations and things like that. It's been more about how the industry works rather than the actual mechanics of how you write. The mechanics of how you write and how you prepare characters and how you do things like that. Wes Campbell, I think, would be my mentor on that. Peter's been a mentor with regards to his expertise and his knowledge of the industry.
Yeah,
and that kind of thing. So
what a great mentor.
Vicky says that she's always adored Peter James' books, and news for you guys, he's actually penciled in to come on the show this season. So if he does appear, like I just appeared, we will ask him. We will ask him questions. It's time for new equipment, guys. It's been, that camera's been here for like 2.5 years now. It's on its way out. We've got to move on to the next part of the show because we're slipping behind because we're loving this conversation. But before we do that, you've got a special kind of hat on at the moment, Matt, and it's something that I'm excited about as a Welshman living in South Wales myself. Can you tell us a bit about this festival?
Well, I'm going to try and get this closer to the camera so you can read it. www.crime.cymru. Crime Cymru is a Welsh crime writers collective that a lady called Alice Hawkins came up with the idea about 5 years ago. There was a small crime literature festival at Cardiff. She was appearing, I was appearing, and a girl called Rosie Clapton was appearing. And we went for coffee afterwards. And Alice said, she's got this idea that wouldn't it be nice if we could get together with all the crime writers across Wales and actually try and do something to promote Welsh crime writing. And we thought, well, that's a really good idea. So we sort of had a good old natter, and then we met subsequently that, and we came up with this idea of Crime Cymru, which is a Welsh crime writers collective where we provide mutual support and we help each other. I'm still the co-chair of the organisation, although I'm not terribly active. There's another lady called Louise Mumford who's now my co-chair, who is a lot more active than I am. She's terrific. But the idea has been to support, and one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to have a Welsh crime literature festival, because there isn't one. You've got some fantastic crime literature festivals in Scotland. You've got some brilliant ones in England. We didn't have one in Wales. There isn't one. And so what we did was we formed a subgroup of the Crime Cymru collective to start researching and putting together a crime fiction festival. And it's next week. We did 2 online ones last year and the year before, which I helped with organising. I helped with organising the physical festival, which is taking place next week, but I had to step back, unfortunately, a few months ago when my mother was taken ill. But it's actually happening next week, and it's in Aberystwyth, and they've got some fantastic people like Ben Aranovich and I think Anne Cleves is there as tall, Claire McIntosh.
Yes.
So that really, I mean, they've managed to pull in some really, really big names. And Aberystwyth, of course, is, well, if the weather's nice.
Yeah, I grew up not far from Aberystwyth, and all I remember from there, massive rolling waves, big strong wind, and but yeah, it's a beautiful place. And I was surprised to see at Aberystwyth rather than somewhere else. I don't know why the decision is there. Louise Mumford has been on the show before. She was fantastic. Oh my goodness, sorry.
She's very entertaining, isn't she?
She is. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. And we were planning on trying to get to this year, although we'd already planned Harrogate. So we're kind of doing one a year at the moment. So that's our destination this year. But of course, we will try our best to get there. And hopefully the success of this one will develop to make the show even better next year.
Well, you do realise if you don't turn up, the warrant will be issued for your arrest, don't you?
It's all right. We're really behind in Wales, so it'll take us ages to find me. No, of course I will. I will definitely get to that. And Chris will. He's laughing. Come on, Chris will come up, and we talked about this before the show. We're looking forward to getting up there, and some of the guests you've got on are incredible. So the website, guys, we just popped up on screen. I will leave a link in the description. So if you're interested, go and check that out as well.
And Matt, sorry, Chris, I was just going to say, have you set up the capacity for, like, we have quite a big American audience as well. So if somebody wanted to get involved and see bits of this, but they couldn't physically be in the place.
Yeah.
Is that possible as well?
It's the website is Gŵyl, GWYL, Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival.co.uk. And it's going to be online. There's going to be a podcast that's running live from the festival as well. So you're going to have physical events which are being transmitted online at the same time. I mean, the work that's gone into it, the guys that have done it is absolutely incredible. They've done so much work, something's got to go wrong.
Well,
unfortunately, I hope that whatever does go wrong, it'll just be minor little glitches, and overall everything, I'm sure it's going to be great fun, because I mean they for a first festival they have packed so much into it.
They have.
It's just incredible. How they haven't had nervous breakdowns, I don't know. Perhaps they have.
Amazing. Well, let's hope it's a success anyway. What we're going to do is move on to the second part of the show, because we're slightly behind. And what we're going to find out is all about your brand new story, No Ordinary Day. I'll play this video and we'll get straight into it.
Okay.
So, Matt, if you could please let everybody know what No Ordinary Day is, just what it's all about. And you can see it above Chris Hooley's head there.
There it is. There's the cover for the book. You can see that? There's the blank one. Okay. No Ordinary Day. I'm going to read this from the draft PDF file of the jacket, because the publishers and I spent so much time working on this that I think it would be unfair upon them to not actually put it all. What it is, it's a non-fiction book, and it stems back to 1984 when I was a policeman in London. When at the time I was working in the police traffic department in the Met, and I was sent on an emergency call to pick up an ambulance, to take an ambulance from St James's Square in central London to the Westminster Hospital. And I didn't know at the time that the ambulance escort I was about to do contained a mortally injured WPC, Yvonne Fletcher. And I actually took Yvonne to hospital with a PC called John Murray, with her in the back of the ambulance. And as we know, when Yvonne got to the hospital, she died at hospital. And what not a lot of people do know is that Yvonne was actually a personal friend of mine. She'd have been at my housewarming party just a few weeks prior to the day she was shot. And when I got home that afternoon after I finished work, I didn't know. We'd heard rumours that a WPC had been killed. We didn't know who it was. There hadn't been a name released publicly. I got home, watched the 6 o'clock news, and that famous picture of Yvonne came on the news. And my wife and I realised it was my friend, or our friend, because she was a closer friend of Yvonne's than I was, that had been killed. And that was a pretty horrendous situation. Now, that was a significant contributory factor to me suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, because one of the flashbacks I used to have was related to the St James's Square shooting where Yvonne was murdered. John Murray, the PC who was with her when she was shot, conducted a campaign which lasted nearly 40 years to try and secure justice, because there was always a bit of a mystery about the story, about the fact that Yvonne's killers had been allowed to go home. The government had given them diplomatic immunity when they weren't actually entitled to it, and had sent them all home to Libya without any prosecutions. And so there was always a bit of a bad taste in the mouth that a WPC had been killed, nobody had been prosecuted, and there was a bit of a mystery about why this had happened. I went to St James's Square a few years ago at the invitation of the Victoria Derbyshire show, because Victoria Derbyshire put together a reunion of myself, John Murray, a PC called Clive Mabry, and a PC called Tony Long. Tony Long had been a firearms officer who was president during the siege. Clive Mabry was an infamous policeman in policing circles, because the night before Yvonne Fletcher's funeral, a PC snuck into the square and snatched Yvonne's hat from where it was lying on the pavement in front of the Libyan embassy, grabbed it and swifted it away so it could go on her coffin. And this guy was a legend, but nobody knew who he was. And the Victoria Derbyshire programme managed to locate him. And so we got to meet this PC and obviously thank him for what he'd done, which was incredible. But on this particular day, the subject came up of a book, because nobody had written the story about what had happened to Yvonne and the siege, because it was the longest siege in UK policing history. Nothing had ever been written about it. There had been loads of articles in the newspapers and on TV and things like that, but nobody had ever written a book about it. And John Murray said to me, he said, "How do you feel about writing the book?" Now, it turned out he was a fan of my fiction work. Yeah. He'd read my fiction books, and he said, "I really like you like fiction. Why don't you ever go writing a non-fiction book?" And I thought, how hard can it be?
So there's a couple of things there to talk about. it's an amazing story, and again, true crime stories is all the rage at the moment. In not in a kind of untasteful way. It's what people are really interested in. But the first challenge for you is moving from fiction to non-fiction, but also writing about something that's personal and close to you as well. How did you kind of manage to do both of those things? And did you kind of just go with it as you have before, or were there kind of steps you had to take to make this go in the right direction, if that makes sense?
Well, I would say that the training and the knowledge I'd acquired through the writing of my 4 novels was preparation for writing this, which is probably going to be the most important work I will ever write. And that, what I'd learned throughout the process of writing those novels taught me how to write in a way that engages a reader. So knowing how to engage the reader, what I had to do was research the story, because it turned out to be an incredibly complicated story, and there was a lot more facets to it than I realised when I first said to John that I'd have a go at writing it. And it was amazing what we managed to get from the National Archives and through freedom of information requests to the Foreign Office. And we managed to get hold of cabinet papers and documents, all relating to that period of the mid to late 1980s and 1990s as well, which revealed essentially I can best describe as a political scandal. It was absolutely incredible what was really going on in the background. I fear the story will shock people, but I don't think it'll surprise them. For people to learn what our government gets up to, supposedly in our best interests, but perhaps not necessarily so. I think people will think, well, that's pretty awful, but am I surprised? Well, probably not. No. But the reality behind it is it's an incredible story. And when you think about this was probably the greatest tragedy in UK policing history, with a unarmed WPC machine gunned from an embassy in the back, murdered, and then a government decision to allow all the people involved in killing her to go home without people.
So Matt, how do you tell the line between, obviously, like when you're researching, like say for example, I read Chaos recently about the Manson family murders, and that person didn't have any connection whatsoever to any of the victims involved. So he could write it from a point of view where he followed different bits of information and he wasn't personally attached to it. But obviously with yourself, obviously you mentioned about your personal and close connection. How did you then, when you find this new information out and you've discovered things that are covered up and things like that, how did you then manage and control that in terms of going, I need to deliver this narrative in this book, and I also need to protect myself from the emotion that I'm feeling?
Well, you make a very good point, but I think the truth is that I didn't at times. I think there were occasions where I was reading things which I found particularly upsetting, and there were occasions where I had to down tools and walk away from the computer, go out with the dogs, and get some fresh air. And there were times where I would go and talk to my wife and say, look, I'm come and look at this. I don't believe what I'm reading. This is just, I can't believe this was going on. So there were, but then you think, right, I've got to knuckle down. I'm so far into this story that I cannot now stop. And eventually, the book started to come together. The various facets, incredible different facets of information coming from everything from the Secret Service, British Telecom, the National Union of Mine Workers. All information was coming from all over things. how the miners' strike of 1984 to 1995, how that wove into the story, was a complete surprise. I mean, who'd have thought there'd be a connection between the strike led by Arthur Scargill in the 1980s and the shooting of WPC Yvonne Fletcher? There is a huge connection between them. The connection is Libya. But, well, I can't say too much because it's all in the book.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it sounds absolutely fascinating, guys. And the link to that book is in the description right now. No Ordinary Day, which is out in 2 weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, let me tell you about that title too, because I did lots of research, and I did lots of Zoom interviews with people who were there on the day, people who are involved in investigation, journalists like Tom Bauer, who made a program about the shooting. Everybody was fantastically helpful. Kate Adie, would you believe, did a Zoom conversation. In fact, I think I did 3 Zoom conversations with Kate Adie, because she was involved in reporting on it and involved in a great deal in the negotiations to free the hostages that were held in Libya. Kate was a great help because she was able to put her journalistic accent to it and say to me, look, have you thought about inquiring there? Have you tried that avenue for research and things like that? Wow. And so, yeah, that's a good idea, you know. So to her investigative journalist skill, I was able to draw on and find new avenues to explore as well. And that was good. It was good advice too.
So Matt, once you get all these, once you've got all the information, you've got all the experiences from other people and the accounts and the things that they're willing to say on record and things like that, how do you piece together the final product? How do you, because obviously you talked before about knowing what a reader would engage with. I'm like, how is that different from fiction to non-fiction?
Well, I did an interview with a particular detective superintendent, and afterwards he contacted me and he asked me how I was getting on, and I was saying, well, it's like I'm juggling. There's so much stuff, so many. It's like I'm putting together a 3-dimensional jigsaw, and I don't know what the final picture is going to look like.
Yeah.
And he said, a bit like running a major inquiry, but doing it all on your own. I said, well, yeah, absolutely. That's what so that's that. When he said to me, running a major inquiry and doing it on your own, I thought to myself, you know, that's how I've got to approach this.
Yeah,
I've got to approach this like I was back in the department, in the Met, running a criminal investigation, and I was going to be out to do a report based on everything I discovered. And so then that's how it started to coalesce, and the story started to follow. And then, Chris, it's really a question of having, when you've written your first draft, and my first draft was 150,000 words.
Wow.
Of polishing it, refining it, rewriting it time after time after time after time, reading it, rewriting it, reading it, rewriting it, time after time. And eventually it boils down, and you take out the repetition, you get the sequences, you get the story so that it follows. And it's a question of thinking, eventually it's nearly finished. Because I think as any publisher and any author will tell you, if you ever go back to any book you've ever written, even when it's been published, you reckon I could make that a bit better.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, right, we've got to move on.
It's done. But anyway, I was telling you about the title, No Ordinary Day.
Oh, yeah.
I interviewed an inspector called Alex Fish, who was this uniform inspector running the operation on the day that Yvonne was shot. And he said to me, he said, when we turned up and we saw all these demonstrations, I thought to myself, this is going to be no ordinary day.
Oh, amazing.
And I thought, that is a good title.
Can I just ask, before we move on, because we've got to move on, we're running late, and I hope you don't mind, we're going to have to go over the hour to get some questions in, and I feel like we need to. I feel like this is something that could very well be optioned. In the modern way of TV series, I think this could definitely go down that route. How would you feel if that was to happen? They approached you about optioning this. Would you feel Oh my goodness, this camera. Would you feel happy enough to let this go down the TV route?
I have to, Chris, because it's already happened.
Oh, there you go. Tedious link.
Yes,
that I didn't know about.
Would you believe that the TV rights to the story were actually sold before the book rights?
Okay.
So so that was very unusual.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got a new agent now, Brew Doherty from DHH. She's bloody wonderful. And what had happened is while I was doing the research, obviously, it created a bit of a buzz within the screenwriting world because they knew I was doing this research on this book. And I had an executive producer get in touch with me who was interested in the story and wanted to acquire the rights. And so I put him in touch with Brew, and they did the deal.
Nice.
And interestingly, the deal was complete even before we'd got a book deal.
Yeah,
which was lovely. Very, very unusual, apparently, to do it that way round.
Look forward to that. Yeah. Okay, so we've got to move on, and we're going to go into part 3 of the show, which is the final part.
To answer your question, bloody excited, mate.
I bet you are. Yeah.
Bloody excited.
Cameo.
Oh yes. Oh god,
Good. Yeah. I hope so. Part 3.
I fancy being somebody from MI5.
Yes. Just change the hat and you'll be fine. Okay, so community questions. If you've got questions for Matt or for any of us guys, please send them in right now and we will answer those in the next kind of 10 minutes, even though we're slightly over, but I'm sure Matt is happy enough to stick around. Send your questions in and we'll play this video and we'll get straight into them. Yes, loving this conversation. Chris, start us off with the staple questions, if you will, please.
Oh, staple questions. So one of the first staple questions is if you could take any fictional character and make that character your own in some way, which character would you choose and why?
Thank you very much for sending this to me earlier on today.
Don't tell them that. We don't send people the answer questions.
For sending me this one question, this is not an easy one because I think about this one and I really didn't know. And the only name that kept popping back into my mind was Jack Reacher.
Oh, nice.
And I know it sounds a bit corny, but I when I created my character Robert Findlay, I wanted a thinking man as opposed to an action man. I wanted a guy who would feel pain, who was realistic, authentic, who was a family man. He wasn't the do or die, super tough type Reacher character. But I would love him to be able to work with Reacher on an investigation. I would like to see the way that two methods of approaching a criminal investigation would be approached by the two characters. One who would want to and smash the hell out of them and get them. The other one would say, well, hold on a minute, let's think about this. You know,
what's funny about this entire interview? We're 58 minutes in, which is we're normally finishing up around now. Your Finley character is a complete series that people love. We haven't even touched on that character yet. And that just goes to show the depth of what, for someone that kind of found themselves in writing, is a testament to how, oh my goodness, to how well you've done. So let's move on because otherwise we'll get wrapped up in that conversation. But guys, there is definitely room for scope and please check out that series as well.
We'll have to have a Matt Johnson part 2 at some point.
I know, yeah. if you could take, Matt, if you could take the ending of any TV show, book, anything literature, and change the ending, what ending are you changing and why?
Oh, right. Can I do a film and a TV series as opposed to
you can indeed, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't want to do a book because I wouldn't want to question any other author's way of ending their stories because I think it's a very personal.
Screenwriters are authors too, you know.
Yeah. Screenwriters, right? Line of Duty.
Okay.
Line of Duty. Line of Duty Series 2 Keely Hawes plays D.I. Denton. And in the last of the episodes where she has been involved in this inquiry, it's just tons of it is all up in the air. And on the last series, they do it all by flashback.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember that. I remember when I'd been absolutely glued to the story and thinking, how on earth are they going to tie all these threads together? And when they did it by flashback, I thought,
Cheap.
too easy.
Too easy.
Yeah.
Too
Cheap.
easy. So for me, I think I would want to have grabbed that Line of Duty series with Keely Hawes as D.I. Denton by the scruff of the neck and said, right, how are we going to produce these results through the process of investigation by the characters, not use the easy solution of a flashback? So that's something in that.
That's a great response. Yeah, love it.
It's a very good response.
Totally different. In a film, Saving Private Ryan.
Okay, interesting.
Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks. Brilliant character, fantastic interactions with his men who he's leading through Germany, and some of them are becoming casualties, but Hanks is always there. He's the steady, solid figure. Then right at the end, where Ryan is going to be sent back to America because his two brothers are being killed, the sniper gets Tom Hanks. And he's lying there dying, and he says to Ryan, go back. You've been given your opportunity. Go do your duty. And then he dies. Oh, shit. I wanted Hanks to live.
Well, of course, it's Tom Hanks. Of course we want him to live.
I actually, Captain Miller. I wanted Captain Miller to live, and I wanted Captain Miller to come again because I thought he was such a fantastic character.
If they kept him alive in this day and age, it'd be bloody Saving Private Ryan 0.20, wouldn't it?
It would have been.
And then we'd have to hate it.
Just a brilliant film.
I know it was. Anyway, okay, we'll get some questions in from the audience. We've got a couple there. Thank you, Anya, of course, always. What is your favorite way to make a scene be more 3D than 2D? And that's a bit of a tricky one, I think.
Well, that's something that Wes Campbell taught me. Because what he taught me, as I mentioned earlier, is to get inside the minds of the characters, and tell the reader or the character from whose POV you're telling the story, because that's another one of the things he taught me is don't switch between characters' POVs within the same chapter. Stick with your POV with your character. If you switch between the minds of one character from one paragraph to the next paragraph, it leaves the reader not quite knowing whose story they're following. But what he said to me was, within the mind of your character, tell us what he is thinking, seeing, experiencing, smelling. Think about all the senses that character has, the sense of sight, smell, hearing, and tell us what those senses are giving him. And you will enable the reader to get into that scene a lot better than if you simply, for example, say what's going on and who's saying what.
Would you do that amongst the dialogue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So when a character is having a dialogue with another character, your POV character is having a conversation with another character, he is watching what's going on. He's hearing what's happening. So tell the reader what he's hearing. Tell him what he's when he's having a conversation with somebody in an office block, have him look out the window, and as he's having the conversation, have him look out the window and look down in the street. Tell us what he sees. Yeah, because life is going on outside that office as he's having the conversation inside. So let's hear that. What's going on? What's he noticed when he's having that?
If you just put a scenario out there, just so we can kind of get to the nitty gritty of what you're talking about. Let's say a detective is interviewing a junkie, and they're trying to get some sort of information. What if you had to approach that scene? What would you be? I don't know why you're laughing now. It's a serious question. What?
Carry on.
No, but what would you do to bring that scene to life? Because obviously you've got.
Well, what I might do, for example, is have the detective observing the drug addict's behaviours. You know, have him observe his body language and clocking his body language and telling you as a reader what he as a expert investigator, interrogator is seeing and learning from that person's body language, for example. And then during the course of it, if he spots something, you can then very briefly say, well, how did he acquire that knowledge to be able to read body language and that kind of thing? That came from a previous experience of dealing with a junkie. So give us a quick story of what that old story was. So then it builds into the character evidence of his experience and his history. So at the same time, you've as doing that interview, you've demonstrated that this is not an amateur interviewer that's doing. It's somebody who's trained, knowledgeable, who has been around and has seen this kind of thing before. That's if you want to. You might do it the other way around, and you might want to say he misses the things. He might be an inexperienced detective who's missing things.
Yeah.
I love that. It depends what angle you want to take. But I would. How you want to? Do you want to portray your POV character as experienced, as naive, as aggressive? What do you want it to be? So you think, right, as an author, I want to behave him something like that. So right, in this situation, you say I want him to be like a bit of a bully boy, a bit aggressive. Then what I might do is have this interaction between him and the drug addict realizing that this detective's got a bit of a short fuse and maybe goes him a little bit, and then the character reacting to it.
I like that. It's when people have before on the show have spoken about they almost interview their characters to know what they are, to know what they like and what they don't like. It's really important to include those sort of things as well. The strengths and struggles.
I write like a pretty comprehensive CV for each character. It changes, evolves as the story goes on. Yeah. But for example, with Finley, I know where he went to school, what O levels he got, what he did for sport in school. None of this comes out in the book.
Yeah.
But it's all there.
However, if you were Finley was to encounter someone and like a one-on-one physical encounter, the fact that if you would put in his CV that he played rugby, his natural talent would be to go and wrestle or tackle that person.
Yeah.
So what kind of physical reaction would come next.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's fantastic. So definitely worth doing. Thank you, Anya, for that question and great answers. Thank you. We've got one next question that we kind of touched on the subject earlier on in the interview, but the end of the question is kind of interesting. So this is from Cheshire Pope. And the question is, as a former police officer and soldier, you have likely encountered some difficult traumatic experiences, which we discussed earlier. How do you navigate about these experiences and how do you prioritize your own well-being and mental health while doing so? And that's kind of the question we want to take from this is people in your situation, how do you kind of deal with that well-being and mental health? And I know you do work with veterans as well. So if you could expand on that kind of knowledge, please.
Let's take it from my personal experience just to begin with. In the beginning, I used to find writing not easy. And as I would write, there would be occasions where I would have to stop and I would find myself writing about situations. Now, I knew I had the knowledge and the memory to write about things authentically, but then as I did so, it would bring back the memories of experiences that I'd prefer to forget.
Yeah.
And there were times where, and I've learned to recognize my own personal symptoms. I know, for example, that if I sit here and I start to feel my core body temperatures going up, I start to get a bit clammy and hot, I know I've got an anxiety attack coming on. So I know to stop, take a deep breath, go do something else, come back to it. So I've learned to recognize my own triggers and what caused them. What I found though was as I wrote more and more, that the effect was quite cathartic.
Okay.
And the effect was quite healing. And as I got more into writing, then I would find that less and less did I experience those kind of anxieties. When I started appearing and talking about my personal experiences in public, my very first sort of major public experience was that one I mentioned earlier at iWrite. And I actually said to the interviewer, look, I've not done this before.
Yeah.
I'm concerned how I'm going to be. If I start to feel uncomfortable, I'll give you a little wave of my hand. There were two of us being interviewed. And I said, if I do that, it's because I'm starting to feel, and we weren't very long into the interview when I did start to feel uncomfortable. And I just gave him a little hand, and he immediately recognized it, and he switched to the other interviewee. And while he was talking to her, I was able to take a few deep breaths, compose myself, and get back on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
And that's how I was. Now, the next one I did, I was a little bit better. Now I've reached the point where any form of that anxiety is pretty rare. It hasn't gone away, and I don't think it ever will go away.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is what I can talk about and what I can't talk about. Can talk about which won't cause me any discomfort. Talk about because I know it will.
Yeah.
Love that.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great. It's great advice, and kind of facing and dealing with what you can handle, and learning that process about learning yourself again, isn't it? It's a great question. Thank you, Cheshire. And we'll do one more before we wrap this up, because we are 12 minutes over the hour, which we very much not at all. Sorry, we're loving this and we appreciate it.
We have a word in Wales, haven't we? It's chopsy.
We love chopsy on this show. It's brilliant. We got two questions from Halo, and I'd like to ask them both, so we'll see how we go. The first one, again, thank you, Halo. Your question's always great. What do TV shows often get wrong about police work? And I love that question because ex-military like yourself, I know there's a lot of military shows that get things wrong. Are there any police shows that get things wrong?
Right, let's look at that exact wording. What do TV shows often get wrong about police work? Everything. Everything. Even down to the epaulets that you see some of these people. I saw one the other day. There was I think it was this new one set in Northern Ireland. The stripes of the sergeant were upside down.
I mean, come on, that's literally the most basic thing you can get wrong, isn't it?
It was just my God. Police procedures are boring. The Police and Criminal Evidence Act is unturnably dull. Ripper. The rules that govern surveillance and that kind of thing. Oh my God! If you were to put these in the reality of police work into TV show, nobody would watch it because it would be tedious, uneventful, and quite frankly, nobody would like it. The way that characters talk in TV shows. Let me give you an example. In the real world, I could be sitting in a CID office, and my DI would walk in, and he'd say, "Hello, Matt. Right, nip up and see the beat. Get a W. I'm going to arrange eyeball on the plot. We'll spin chummy drum, see if we can find the sparkle." And to me, as a young DC sitting at my desk, I'd know exactly what he was talking about. But if you put that in a TV show, in fact, if you put that in a book, people are going to say, what the hell is he talking about?
You know what? I think I'd enjoy watching that. I'm like, what did he say? No idea. Brilliant.
Oh, and believe me, some of these ex-flying squad detectives actually do talk outside their mouths like that. They really do. Yeah, I don't know how they acquire these skills, but they do. But what he was actually saying to me was, go off and see the beak. That's the magistrate. Get a W, search warrant. I'll arrange eyeball on the plot. That's surveillance on suspect promises. We'll spin Chummy's drum. We'll search the suspect's address. Then we'll see if we can find the sparkle, stolen jewellery.
Nice.
All perfectly clear.
Yeah.
But if you go for authentic and put that in a TV show, people are going to go, what the hell is he talking about? So as a real life...
To be honest, when you said it, I was just imagining Danny Dyer saying that. Like,
so what? There has to be a balance, and the same thing is true of crime writing, because if you make things too authentic, then they're not entertaining. You know, you cannot have situations where it takes 6 months to get a DNA result.
Yeah.
That's reality. But if you want to keep a crime story moving, you've got to be able to bend the truth a bit. And so what you do is you have to stretch the truth within the realms of plausibility and keep it entertaining. And that's what TV shows do a little bit more than crime novelists do. Crime novelists are sometimes guilty of stretching the truth a little bit too far, but most of them get it just about right. TV shows, sky's the limit. The Bill was very good.
Brilliant.
The Bill, remember the Bill?
I love the Bill, yeah.
I do remember the Bill.
I still remember that introduction of the feet walking in step, and I loved it.
Yeah, that's it. The Bill was great, and probably about one of the most accurate. Do not get an ex-cop on Line of Duty.
Brilliant.
Line of Duty and the authenticity of Line of Duty is not very popular in policing circles, and that's one of the problems that genuine policemen have, is that there's a perception amongst the public in many spheres that what they see on the television, like AC-12 and investigating things like that, is what really happens. That's I think an issue that a lot of genuine policemen have with some of the TV shows, is that a lot of the public get the idea that that's actually how things happen, and it's not.
It's interesting because some of the audience that watch the show are from America, and the policing between America and the UK is very, very different. So if you've not seen kind of these shows, then it's worth having a look at them to kind of get an understanding that how different the culture and the reactions are to the police in America and UK are. It's a great answer. Thank you. And great question. We've got one more from Halo before we wrap it up and finish up, because we are pushing on. And Halo says, this is a good question for people who are into researching anything they're not kind of used to. And that question is, what is the most valuable piece of research that you did?
I think the most valuable piece of research I did was the very first application I made to the National Archives, where I was researching information about events that had happened during 1984 to write the current book, No Ordinary Day. Having an idea that information might be held in the National Archives, but truthfully having no idea what I was actually going to find. And it opened a door into a whole new world.
I mean, it is incredible, because if you think about it now, from an event that happened 5 years ago, we have everything documented on the internet. It's very easily accessible. But in 1984, we weren't really going modern technology, and the internet wasn't even invented at that point. So actually researching is incredibly difficult.
Another interesting fact from 1984. There were 60 police officers deployed on duty that day. There were 60 anti-Gaddafi demonstrators and about the same number of pro-Gaddafi demonstrators on the other side of the road. And there were another 40 men inside the Libyan embassy. About 250 to 300 people involved on that day. One woman.
Wow.
And she was the one who got shot.
Jeez.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, it was strange.
Wow.
No? 250, 301 against, and it's the one girl who happens to be there, and she got shot.
Wow. Incredible story. Guys, please go on to that link and get No Ordinary Day. Pre-order it for next week or the week after. We will certainly do the same. And that it's incredible, and we can't wait to see that story. Matt, we have basically 20 minutes over the time, which almost never happens on this show.
So another nice little exclusive before I go as well.
Well, we would love to, yeah.
Okay. As a uniform inspector, I was involved in several drownings where people went into rivers and weren't located. Now, you remember this story that's been recently hit the press about Nicola Bulley?
Yeah.
And there was all that stuff about why she'd not been found, things like that.
Yeah.
I was sitting at home watching that story with my wife, and I said, "Give it 3 weeks, she'll turn up." And my wife said, "Well, how do you know that?" And I said, "Well, because it's a tidal river." I said, and my experiences at tidal rivers is when divers, including people folding and who went there to help, and the police divers, what happens is they section off a stretch of river, and then they search it. And they go in the dark, under the water. It's absolutely horrible. At fingertip searching, trying to find a body in the bottom of the water is absolutely murderous. They don't find her. They say, right, that stretch of river has been searched. And they come back the following day, and then they mark it up, and they go and search in the next stretch of river. And then what's happened, because it's a tidal river, is poor Nicola, who's under the water, has been picked up by the moving tide in the water and has been moved. So she has moved from an area that they hadn't searched into an area that they have searched. Yeah. So they've declared their area free. She's not there. And they're moving now downriver to search another area. Only she has been moved by the tide into an area where they hadn't searched. Wow. I've actually had that same scenario happen to me 3 weeks later, when what happens is the body decays and it starts to produce gases that make the body buoyant. And they come up for a short period, actually, because after if they're not discovered during that short period when they're buoyant, the gases dissipate and they will sink again, never to resurface.
Yeah.
During that opportunity, and I promise you that is what happened with Nicola. Is she was swept by the current back into an area that had been previously searched.
Wow. It's incredible, isn't it? We have the biggest tides in the world almost in the UK, and it is. My father lives up in Ferryside in South Wales, and we get the river. I can't remember the name of it, but you can literally see the tide height difference is 8 to 9 foot difference.
Yeah, incredible.
In and out tide. It is incredible to see in a river. Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much, Matt. But before we do wrap this up and finish off, where can people find out more about you, and where can they get this book from, other than the link in the description?
Well, No Ordinary Day. It comes out on the 8th of June. It's going to be serialized in a national newspaper. I'm not allowed to say who, but it's going to come out during May. And then it's going to be available in all, as they say, in all popular outlets. It's available through the Great Big River site, and it's available through Waterstones, Foils, Hatchards. We're doing a talk at Hatchards on the 27th of June, Hatchards in Piccadilly, and the formal launch is on the 8th of June. So we're looking forward. About me, website, mattjohnsonauthor.com.
Yeah, it's a brilliant write-up on you on Amazon as well, with a lot of details. So yeah, check it out. Matt, honestly, it's been a pleasure to chat to you. And like Chris said, Matt Johnson .2 would go well, because we haven't even touched on the very successful series of your books that you've written. So been an absolute pleasure. We will chat to you hopefully a little bit off air after this. Guys, if you haven't hit the like button already, please do so. Please subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave a comment, because that really helps. And if you have any questions, Matt is on the tweet that we shared earlier. His Twitter tag is on there. Please give him a follow. And if you've got questions, follow-up questions, give him a shout out. But anything from you, Matt or Chris, anything else before we finish up?
Well, when I come back, I'll tell you about the day I met John le Carré. Save that for another day.
Definitely. You all good, Chris?
Yeah, I just again reiterate your thanks to Matt. It's been an absolutely riveting conversation, and I'm going to listen back to it.
I think I will.
I enjoyed it, so I'm looking forward to hopefully we can get Matt on again.
It really isn't. In 240 odd shows, we haven't often gone 1 hour 25 minutes.
We've never. This is a new writing community chat show record.
It is.
Can I also say that this is a very slick, very professional operation that you run here. This is very good. I mean, even down to the layout of the page that I'm looking at and everything about this. This is just very well done. And
Matt, we've never had anyone that's come on the show before that's on a beach, so thank you. It's been wonderful. No, appreciate the comments, we really do, and please stick around. We'll have a little chat to you after the show, guys. Thank you for watching and spending your Friday night with us. It's a pleasure that you do so. We really appreciate it. And the after show people on if you sign up to our Patreon, you'll get to see some bonkers after shows and some really weird conversations between me and Chris. So please do that, because clearly I need a new webcam today. It's been on the fritz. That is a sign of the times. But thank you so much. We appreciate you. We'll be back next week with a brand new show. We've got some incredible guests lined up for this season. As we mentioned earlier, we're 5 episodes in to season 11, which just seems bonkers right now. But we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your support. And we wouldn't want to be here without your support. We thank you, we appreciate you, and we'll see you very soon. Please stay safe, and we will be back next week. Look after yourselves. Have a great weekend. Thank you from me and Chris and Matt. We'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Good night.